Welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered. Today, we are going to be talking about a topic that will be very universal. It's about the hijab, and we have a couple of guests on that are hijabis themselves. And we wanted to bring on guests that are hijabis so they can talk on their personal experience. So, if you guys could just introduce yourselves, say your name, where you're going to go to school.
Okay, I guess I'll start. My name is Amara. I'm currently going to UIC. I'm in my third year of medical school. Um, yeah, that's it.
I can go next. My name's Hafsa. Um, I'm a senior at Lane Tech High School. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
My name is Kainat. I'm a senior at Loyola, and I'm also happy to be here.
All right, thank you guys for introducing yourselves. And then I forgot to mention who we have today. We have Hannah with me, Anam, Amina, Nazish, and then we also have Sarah Auntie. But today we just wanted also like a disclaimer, we just want to say that within Islam, like the hijab is fard, but obviously like it's your choice, whatever you want to do. If you want to wear hijab, that's up to you. But we'll obviously go into further details with that. But as we go into this conversation, I just want to start off to the hijabis. Basically, your personal story or basically why you chose to wear the hijab, anything you want to say about why you chose to wear the hijab, what made you want to wear the hijab, or just anything that could be that you could say about it.
I'll go ahead and start us off. Hi, I'm Amina. Um, for me, I started wearing hijab when I was 12, and I'm 24 now, so I've been wearing it for 12 years. And at the time, I felt like it was a really big decision for me. But looking back, I realized how much easier it was for me because I was at a Muslim school. So it's not that difficult when you're like surrounded by Muslims day in and day out to, practice hijab. It was like my real feat came after I graduated MCC and went on to public school, and I had to like learn how to navigate in like a non-Muslim world where people were dressing any kind of way, and so and that was definitely really difficult for me. I think like my early adolescence was like the most challenging. Um, but like, I don't know, I kind of just have seen myself come out on the other side, and I feel like really confident and like assured in who I am as a hijabi woman. And I don't know, I do think that because I've been hijabi for so long that I've become just a little not jaded necessarily, but I've become more or less like sensitive to other people's like situations, and I had to catch myself. Like last week I found myself like judging somebody on her journey as a hijabi, and I look back on it and I was like, what was I thinking? Because I know that I wouldn't have said that, 5 10 years ago. I wouldn't have said that, but I don't know, it's just like the point of my life where I'm at now. I kind of have to understand that not everything is black and white, not everything is as cut and dry as it seems. But I'm gonna stop talking now.
I can go next. So for me, I mean, it has been under a year that I started wearing hijab. So I didn't grow up in like a traditional Muslim school or environment even. I had to kind of learn on my own or had like private lessons. So for me, it was strictly built on teaching myself and making my iman very strong. And I was thinking about wearing the hijab for many years, but I couldn't really bring myself to do it for, I had many reasons. But as I got my iman became stronger, I realized that like I felt like when I didn't wear it, I felt something was missing. So it never felt like an addition to my life. It always felt like this was missing, and now it's here. Now I'm wearing it. Now I feel like more whole. It was just always like a part inside of me is the best way I can explain it.
I can go next. So I actually started wearing the hijab about 2 years ago. I was a sophomore in college. And if you ask me, like, if I was that girl in high school and earlier that always had my hair done. Like, if I was wearing sweats, if I was wearing a sweater, if I had no makeup on, whatever, my hair always had to be done. So from like looking back right now, it's like I wouldn't have thought like I would wear the hijab. But obviously, as I kind of moved out of the environment I was in high school, I kind of lost those, like, you kind of go into this certain community where, the thought of you wearing a hijab doesn't seem as scary. Like, I felt like I was surrounding myself with more people that would, like, appreciate it, or not, like, be so just like, oh, what does she have on now? So I always wanted to wear it, but the biggest reason I didn't wear it earlier was because I was scared. I was scared of what people would think. I was scared that I wouldn't get, people wouldn't see past the scarf, right? So it took me a while to actually wear it, but then, like I said, I kind of, after I left high school, being in college and just being around certain people just made me feel a lot more comfortable with my decision. So I decided to put it on, and it was kind of spontaneous. Like, some girls I know start off like only wearing it to school first, and then they kind of slowly work their way up, or like they wear it at certain places and then they become full time. I kind of just did it. Like, I was like, okay, I'm gonna just put it on, and then I remember just going to work the next day, and that was it. Like, I'm full, I'm committed. And alhamdulillah, like, obviously we'll talk about the pros and cons like later, but I think it's one of the best decisions I've made. And I'm again, I'm very thankful for that. So, but yeah.
I can go next. So I had a rocky journey with my hijab. I put it on first in fifth grade, and I faced a lot of bullying with it, so I took it off. And then I put it on again in seventh grade, and I was pretty committed to it until I started high school. I started hanging out with, like, the wrong crowd, all of that, and so the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, I went overseas and I took it off. And I was like, oh my God, finally, like, I can, you know, figure myself out. But by the end of the summer, I put it on for a split second and I missed it. Like, I was like, I really love my hijab. Like, why did I ever take it off? So coming back, I put it back on, and I've been committed to it ever since. I don't think I could ever let go of my hijab ever again. But at the same time, I'm not ashamed of my past because I had to go through that to reach the point that I'm at right now. And yeah, I just love being a hijabi. I feel like it made me stronger in a different way.
Okay, and I guess that leaves me. So I started wearing hijab basically right when I got my period, which was like 12 or 13. I was in eighth grade. Because I always knew like I had to wear it, and my mom wore it, and so I was never really pressured to it, but I sort of knew like I had to, and I just put it on, and I didn't really give it much thought at the time. I was just like, this is something I have to do, which in retrospect, I'm kind of glad I did, because when it got hard, I was already in the habit of wearing it, so I was able to like work through my crises, which like I had multiple, and I think like everyone who wears hijab has like multiple crises over like being a hijabi woman. I think the hardest part about it was coming to terms like what it meant for me, because I think I'm 24. Yeah, I'm 24 now. So like in the 10-ish, 12 years when I was wearing hijab, like in the beginning I didn't have a reason, and then I kind of adopted other people's reasons, and then I kind of adopted like when I was in early college, like the reason that like, oh, to wear hijab means to be like liberated and empowered and woke. And I don't think like these were all like other people's reasons, and they didn't really fit for me. And I think really what made me come to my terms with hijab and stop making it, such a struggle, was realizing like why I wear it, which in the end of the day was like as an act of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as like an act of submission to him, even though like it's hard, like I'm doing it for him. And I think coming to terms with why I wear it, even though it took like 10 years, I think when I was like 22 when I like finally found my own reason for it, it really lifted like a big burden off my shoulders, because like I finally had a reason to wear it and be like proud of it, and not like get self-conscious. I mean, I still do to some degree, but it's not to the degree that I used to. And I think I'm very like proud of wearing it now, whereas before I might have said that, but I wouldn't have meant it from my heart.
Thank you everyone so much for sharing your different stories, or at least why you started or how you started and all of that. But one thing that I wanted to ask all the hijabis is, what have been, if you just think about the whole time, like, you know, your life as a hijabi, what have been the most positive but also the most negative things, if you had to like say like one of each, so the most positive and the most negative thing that's come out of you being a hijabi, what would those things be? And anyone can go for it.
So for me, I think the positives outweigh the negatives for sure. What's positive is that people like recognized me as Muslim. Like I loved walking down the street and seeing another Muslim, they knew I was Muslim. It also gave me a reason to act like in a proper manner because I knew I was representing something bigger than me. And I personally think it's beautiful. Like everybody at school and everyone is like, "Oh, you look so pretty," and we don't really have that many hijabis at my school, so I thought it was amazing that I could do that. I would say the negative was people's comments, teachers' comments, stuff like that. But alhamdulillah, it was nothing that I couldn't deal with.
I definitely agree with what Hafsa said. I think the positive is that for me it is like when I put it on, I really feel connected to my religion and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And almost on like the same level prayer does, maybe even more. Like I really feel like I am committing an act of worship, like I am Muslim when I'm wearing hijab. And it's something like you wear throughout the day. So it's like a constant reminder. Like when you look in the mirror, when you talk to other people, you see other Muslims, like you're reminded that you're Muslim. And I think that's something like nothing else in my life does. And I think the hard part is also like the good part about it, which is that like you're so identifiably Muslim that a lot of non-Muslims can't see you beyond hijab. Like you will always be like a Muslim woman to them. You'll never be like a personality or have like your own likes and dislikes. Like you are every single Muslim woman they've ever met, and they kind of translate all those experiences onto you, even though we're all our own people. And I think it's a little hard sometimes for non-Muslims to like see beyond our hijab. Not that they like aren't capable of it, but like you're always like I've always felt that I am first and foremost like a Muslim woman, which is a good and bad thing, but I feel like they can't see me beyond it sometimes and like who I am as a person.
Um, I would definitely agree and say that my favorite part is being recognized as Muslim. Like I remember when I started wearing the hijab, people would say salam to me, and I was just taken aback for a second because I would forget. You know, I was like, how do they know I'm Muslim? But that is definitely my favorite part. One of, I guess I would say negative, which is one of the reasons I was kind of hesitant at first to put on the job, was thinking about like the future and like my career, because I'm planning on going on into law and like becoming a lawyer, and I was like, there's already limited opportunity for me as a woman of color, and now, you know, I'm visibly Muslim. But then like I remember I was watching this lecture and they were saying that if there's no space for you as a Muslim, would you even want to be in that environment? And so I constantly remind myself of that, is that if they don't want me with who I am, do I even want to be there? And so once again, like even in the negative, there's a positive. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I'm sure. I'm so glad you brought that up, Kainat, because that was what I was gonna say for my con, is that I was so afraid. Like I already kind of worried too much about how people perceive me, but now I'm like, okay, with this hijab on, I feel like no one sees past my hijab. And maybe it's just because I've been working at for the past, like all my part-time jobs to like my volunteer, everything I do is so revolved around, I'm the only Muslim, I'm the only hijabi. So I always felt like, okay, now I have like such a, like everyone's just like, what happened to her? Like, why is she wearing a hijab all of a sudden? Like, what's wrong with her? So I just had this thing like, okay, you know, when I go into my profession in the future, like, are people gonna want to talk to me? Are my clients gonna want to trust me? Like, are they just gonna see like, oh, she's Muslim, she's not gonna understand, you know? Whereas before, when we didn't wear hijab, they wouldn't know, like, they wouldn't know I'm Muslim, right? So that was one thing I always worried about too. But then another con that I wanted to mention is, I think as Muslims in general, as women in general, we all have such a microscope on us. But I think as hijabis, we have even more of a microscope, especially when it comes to like how religious you are. So that was one of my biggest fears, is that, okay, I know how close I am to Islam, but I'm scared that if I wear this hijab, people are going to automatically assume that I should be praying 5 times a day. You know, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, and I should be quote unquote the perfect Muslim woman. And I know that I am working there and I have a different journey, but again, I was just so afraid that, okay, what if one day I wear something that's not covering like my butt all the way, like people are going to say stuff, but if I wasn't a hijabi, I feel like that attention, like they wouldn't say as much, you know. So that was one of my fears. But to top it off as a positive, one thing I definitely want to say is that when I started wearing the hijab, I knew I was representing Islam, right? Like I knew I am the face of, like, I'm a hijabi woman. You can tell I'm Muslim. That really made me, I feel like, become, my character just changed. Like I knew that whatever I was saying, whatever I was doing, automatically people would be like, she's a Muslim woman. If I were walking around with a hijab, like swearing and like doing all these things, like I'm like representing a religion, you know? So I really felt like that shift within me when I started wearing the hijab. I truly feel like I became a more like calmer, more like loving, like just everything amplified. All like the positive traits in me, I feel like just amplified. So that's definitely a positive. But again, thank you everyone for sharing your pros and cons. And I'm really thankful that everyone had like different ones. So everyone can kind of hear and see like the different aspects that we all kind of go through. But Hannah, I was wondering if you can actually talk about hijab, like what the term hijab means and like the whole idea of covering yourself in the Islamic point of view.
Yeah, so I want to start by like using an ayah from Surah Nur. It's ayah 31, and I'm going to read right off so I don't make any mistakes. But the ayah basically reads, and tell the believing women to lower their gaze and guide their private parts and not expose their adornment, which refers to their hair, except that which necessarily appears, therefore, and to wrap a portion of their head covers over their chests, and to not expose this adornment except to their husbands, their fathers, their husbands' fathers, their sons, their husbands' sons, their brothers' sons, their sisters' sons, their women, and all those that are considered non-mahrams. And so basically, Islamically, there is no doubt that hijab is fard. Like we absolutely must wear the hijab. But there's also nothing in the Quran that says to force your children to wear hijab or to force your sisters to wear hijabs or your wives, you know. And so it's definitely a decision to be made on your own, but there's been timelines that were given in hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that said when women or when girls should start wearing the hijab, right? And so I want to open this up to ask like the other non-hijabis, which I'm obviously a part of, what is, knowing that hijab is like fard, then it's something that we have to do, what have been like the biggest like trials in stopping you from fully accepting the hijab? Like I'd love to talk after you guys, but I want to see if any of you are willing to talk first.
I can start. What, like I've always like, you know, when I was like going through high school and even college, like I always thought about wearing the hijab, but I also like came across to a time where like I, like, you know, you were born into Islam, so I came to a time where I fully accepted Islam for myself, you know, not because I was born into it, but there was a moment and realization where it's like, okay, Islam is for me. So that was one of the times where I was like, okay, like I want to consider wearing the hijab. But one thing I feel like for when it comes to the hijab, everyone has their own reasons or timeline on when they want to wear the hijab. And for me specifically, like what's stopping me would be that there's so many other things I want to work on. And I know several other hijabis that I've spoken to, it's that they said they were in the same position as me. And what helped them was just putting it on, you know, like it forced them to like be a better person, you know, pray more, like read the Quran daily. So I don't know, there's just like some things that I want to work on myself first, or like, and there's like, honestly, like with hijab too, like, you know, there's some insecurities that come into play too, which might be stupid to say, but the thing is like when I wear the hijab, like I don't feel like beautiful or anything. And that's like, you know, that's my own insecurity that I need to work on. And, you know, like regardless if you wear the hijab or not, you're beautiful. But that's like one thing that I struggle to look on. And also like having an American identity plays a lot onto being like an American Muslim. I feel like there's so many standards on how you should dress, how you should look. And it's like being an American Muslim just like, you know, steers me away from that, which is really like, you know, it's not good to say. But the thing is like, I feel like everyone has their own struggles by being an American Muslim. And that's another aspect on why I struggle to, you know, become a hijabi, which obviously I'm working on to do. But yeah, I feel like those are some like things that are like stopping me from. But honestly, like hopefully at the end of the day, inshallah, I do become one because that's what I strive to do at the end of the day.
Mama made some really good points, which some of them I actually didn't even think about. But like everyone has said, all of our experiences have been different. We're all on different levels of our religion, and we perceive it differently too. For me personally, like we all have our different reasons why we don't wear it. But for me, I think I think it roots mostly where Anam was coming from, how she had mentioned that she doesn't want people to see nothing past the hijab. Like all they see is the hijab, and that's also something that I am pretty worried about. It's hard as a Muslim woman to function in a place like America because we're living in so much diversity, and there's like so much attacks happening on Muslims, on our identity, on how we look. They literally. How many stories have you guys heard about Muslim women being attacked just because they're wearing a hijab? Like that story about that woman who was attacked in front of her kids, that pregnant woman in a cafe who was literally attacked. And when you think about it, even men like Punjabi Sikhs, they're attacked because of their turban and their long beard, and people think of them to be Muslim when they're really not. And their intention behind attacking them is because they thought they were Muslim. And just how America sees Muslims, there's no respect. It's really hard. It's really hard. I can't imagine going into an interview or going to school like with a hijab on. It just feels like I don't know. It's a fear. It's definitely a fear, and I admit that that's a really big thing that's been stopping me. Another thing, like it's literally just as small as like if I would ever wear it to the masjid or another Islamic event, I'd always fidget around with it. Like it would fall off. Like it wouldn't stay properly. It's really hard to deal with. Like I'm sure you guys can relate when you guys are first starting off. It's really hard to keep it on. Like it slips off, something like that. Like it just you're always worried about how it looks. That's what I had um, stopping me from wearing it.
Okay, so what Nazish said like brings up like a really valid point, and honestly, I think that's one of the biggest things that's been contributing to the reason why I have not worn the hijab. And the thing for me is this is something I've been actively struggling with for like 2 years. Like since my junior year of high school, I've like set dates for myself. I said, okay, this summer I'm gonna do it. Like I was supposed to start this winter again. Like that was another deadline that I set for myself that I haven't done. And I feel like a large part of it has to do with like the whole concept of identity. I feel like my experience as a Muslim in this country has been very like different than that I know of my peers and of my friends. Like where other people that are Muslim and don't wear hijab in this country they face their own struggles of prejudice as people of color. I honestly have not experienced that at all. Like as somebody that does not reflect like any type of ethnicity, like I have really been treated like a white girl my whole life. And so I can say and do and act however I like because nobody will see me as like a Muslim or as a person. I'm not representative of any race, of any ethnicity, of nothing. And so I feel like wearing hijab, like it's stripping me of my privilege. And while that's one thing that's like actually really great that I'll be able to represent like my religion, I fear that I will no longer have like this ability to be myself without wearing the hijab. Like from then on I'll be a Muslim. Like I'll be not like just Hannah, I'll be like Hannah the hijabi. And that scared me a lot, like in the sense of like, oh, like work and school, and I want to apply to med school, and it's like maybe they're racist, like maybe they're Islamophobic, like maybe somebody will decide like that's the reason why they didn't like me as much as a candidate. Because to be honest, in our country, as much as we'd like to say that we're over this, like racism and Islamophobia are very much predominant like in the US. And so I just had this fear of like, I'm not going to be myself anymore. I'm going to be like Hannah the Muslim. And I feel like it might be a shallow reason. I feel like while it's valid, it's very shallow, and especially because I'm thinking like it's just hair, but this whole time it's been a struggle of like, while it's just hair, like it's hair. It's something that nobody else even thinks twice about. But like for Muslim women, like that's such a significant part of our modesty, like covering our heads. And that's just been my struggle so far.
I
I
just
wanted to
wanted to say, go ahead, Nazish.
I wanted just to add, we're living in like really modern times, right? And these are issues that they didn't have to deal with back in the Prophet's time at all. So while we're trying to live in a world that's always modernizing, always constantly changing while keeping our religion, and I feel like that's the biggest struggle that we've had. Like Hannah said, it's just hair, but and that's something that they thought of, back then. It's just hair, it doesn't really matter that much. But today, in this day and age, we're always constantly thinking about how we look as women, like uh keeping yourself, like making yourself look as great as you can. Everything that we do, we're always just keeping ourselves in check. We're having to constantly present ourselves as best as we can, and it's hard. It's really difficult. That's what I was wanted to mention, that these are things that we didn't have to worry about back in the day, but this is a relatively new struggle for just our generation, like our time.
I just wanted to say that, how Hannah said, like, it is a piece of cloth, and just like, covering your hair. Um, it's honestly interesting, because the thing is, the fact that wearing the hijab has like the label, like, you're Muslim, you're like, you represent Islam. But the thing is, like, even in fashion, or like, even back in the day, people would wear headscarves and they would cover their hair, but that didn't necessarily mean they were Muslim or they represented Islam. So even in fashion, when they wear like a headscarf, like, models are praised for, like, wow, you look so beautiful, yada yada yada. But then if a Muslim wears it, they're like degraded for that. They're discriminated against. And I just wanted to go into another topic, would be there's this model named Halima, and I don't know if you guys have all gone, like, looked at her story recently. She talked about her hijabi struggles within the industry, within the fashion industry, and how she struggled. Basically, she basically had to compromise her religion in order to succeed within this industry. So have any of you guys heard about her? Or do you guys have any comments on specifically about what she had said at all?
I think is really interesting about Harima Aiden is that I loved what she said about the hijab being more than just a piece of cloth. Because yes, in the Quran it directly refers to the covering for our heads as khimar and not hijab. But the idea of hijab is like the preservation of your haya, right? Like it's more than just what you wear. It's your clothes, it's your behavior, it's your modesty, right? And Islam is like that's the most beautiful thing about Islam. Like we are very big proponents of modesty. And I thought it was so interesting because she was saying that while she was covered, her head was covered, but she was not wearing hijab. Like she said she couldn't tell you how many times she had worn a shirt over her head to represent the hijab. And I just thought that it was like such a brave thing, especially because she was signed with a model agency that like Hailey Bieber was signed to. So many of these other huge models were signed to, which we can only imagine the amount of work she was getting and the fame that she would have continued to get if she kept up in the industry. She was walking for these big name brand runways, and brand name runways, what I say. And so I just think that was like a really brave thing to do, and I cannot imagine walking away from, like, I personally, like, it was shocking to me, like, because I could not imagine walking away from something that great. But like her religion came up like ahead of that, and I honestly think that that's the best thing for us to do, because again, we were talking about how it's just hair, it's just a scarf. Like at the end of the day, like it's more than that. Like it's Islam, it's like our representation of the religion.
So I am not gonna lie, I didn't really know who Halima was until actually it was Amara that texted me about it and be like, did you see her her story? And I read through it and I thought it was incredible. I did find myself getting confused, but I think that was more me and not like her delivery. But I just remember towards the end of her story, she said she posted like a picture of her and she was like dressed like so beautifully, so modestly and everything. And she said, this is the standard. And I like that idea of just like setting that boundary for yourself and like respecting yourself to know what you will and won't do, regardless of whether it's like a professional or personal appearance or whatever. And so I thought it was really cool, see a Black hijabi in the spotlight. So it really meant a lot to me.
I was really like, well, when my friends first told me, she's like, go look at Halima Adam's Instagram story. I honestly expected that like she had taken off the hijab, just because it's just so normalized in like the hijabi influencer community, whenever there's like a big news about hijab, like usually it's them taking it off. So like to actually see a story where she was like, I'm actually, going to stop modeling for companies that are going to do this to me. I'm going back to like a form of hijab that I always used to wear and a form of hijab that hasn't been diluted, which honestly so refreshing. I realized that like as Muslim women, especially like I have lacked and we have lacked a sort of representation where it comes to like deen over dunya. And I think what Halima Aden did more for like Muslim women than like any sheikh giving like a sermon or like any like Muslim Twitter like guy like tweeting like a 12-page thread, like a 12 tweet thread on hijab. Like she inspired so many people. Like everyone I know was just so inspired, so amazed, and just so like everyone could relate to like the struggle she said in her Instagram story. And I think it really talks about how much we need this sort of like positive representation as hijabi women. Like I think one of the things she talked about was like representation, and like if representation isn't like good representation, then it's not worth it at all. And I thought that's just so true thinking about sort of like the other hijabi influencers that are there. Like I never realized how much I needed to see someone like come back to hijab to feel motivated in my own hijab and feel like I like can be a hijabi woman and live in like a Western world.
I just want to say something really quick before people go on about something Pookie touched on with the hijabi influencers. Now, everybody's journey is their own, and if a woman chooses to like take hijab off after wearing it, that is between her and God. My only thing that I want to say is that it only becomes problematic, because the action in itself is not problematic, but it only becomes problematic when you use your platform as an influencer to try to encourage other younger girls and women who are insecure in their hijab to take it off as well. And I think that's where you have to like understand your reach as somebody who has like followers, and to understand like you can talk about your own journey. And because like I knew somebody that took her hijab off for safety reasons. She was going to school in rural Illinois and she just didn't feel safe. And I was like, I understood that. But like, I'm thinking of like Dina Tokyo is the only one that's coming to mind right now. But it's one thing to take it off, but to then like encourage other people who are not necessarily like sure of themselves or who might have even used you as a role model. I think that that's really unethical, and like that's kind of where it crosses the line from acceptable to like completely unacceptable. And I just wanted to make that distinction really quick.
Yeah, I completely agree, Amina. I think like when I said hijabi influencers, I mostly meant like I realized that we didn't have any role models of like hijabis going back to like in connecting with their religion. I think that we've seen so many people talk about like their struggles with religion, which is okay, and we all struggle with religion. We all struggle with hijab, and I'm not like knocking them on like whatever choice they've had, but it made me realize like the lack of role models we had, specifically choosing like deen over dunya, I suppose.
You guys basically said what I was going to say about like the influencers and stuff, because again, when I wanted to become a hijabi, the first thing I started to do was start following all these like influencers that like, were known for like being hijabi, modest fashion and everything, because literally being a hijabi, like from everyone's different, but for me, I had to make changes. Like I had to get rid of my wardrobe. Like I'm not saying I didn't wear modest clothes before, but I had to make it more modest. Like I had to start wearing full sleeves and everything, right? So I'm like, okay, I want to feel like this is going to be a lifestyle. So I don't want to feel like this is like a forced thing where I'm like, I have to wear like full sleeve and I don't feel beautiful. So I started following all these modest influencers and everything. So I, like Amina and Amara said, like everyone's story is different, but I'm going to be honest, it kind of hurts like to see these people that you were following and they just take it off and you're like, man, I was like following you and I would look up to you and I would look at your stories from like how you wore the hijab to how you would dress like a non-modest outfit and turn in modest, like every little thing, I would look at that. So it does kind of hurt you. But with Halima, like again, I was saying there's so many people right now that are taking it off, seeing her story, and like I really recommend, if you have not looked at her Instagram story, she saved it, please read through it and like skim through it, even just get a glimpse of it. It's so refreshing. Like I didn't realize that I wanted to hear it. And I'm going to be honest, wearing the hijab is very difficult. Again, everyone has their different reasonings. I even though I've only been wearing it for 2 years, there have been moments where I felt like I wanted to take it off. And the biggest reason for that is because of this like Western society and like the way like it's very difficult. Like I feel like if I were in like somewhere else where more women are wearing hijab, I would feel a lot more like accepted. But it's really hard, like with how you dress and the fashion now and like this and that. So it's really difficult. So her story and her being so open about her struggles made me feel like, okay, if someone as big, Halima was such a big, is a big model for her. If she can do something like that, put her deen over her, like this dunya, and someone like me, like I can do it too. And again, obviously not everyone's gonna feel that way. But it truly was very inspiring for me. So
Okay, so when I first saw her story, I'm not gonna lie, I saw the first slide and I was like, oh my God, please don't tell me that she took it off. But then as I started watching her story, I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful, like mashallah. And then it kind of like made me take a step back and say, if she, in some instances, some of the pictures she showed, she was dressed pretty modest, but in her eyes, it wasn't modest enough. And so I had to step back and look at myself and say, I have a lot of work to do. Like, yes, this is a step, and I really love, whatever I have going on, but um, there's a lot of work I still need to do. But another person that I really respected throughout that whole story, besides Halima, was her mother. She, from day one, she told Halima how she felt about modeling and how she represented the hijab, and that never changed. She always let her, she always let her know that she wasn't okay with it, but she wasn't going to stop her from doing what she wanted to do. And I think that was really beautiful, and I have a lot of respect for her mother. Yeah, that's it.
Guide, if you had something to say, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so I was gonna add to what Anam was saying about the whole like wearing hijab in a Western society. When I saw the story of Halima, I thought not only was it like brave of her to be a representation, like knowing that she's a hijabi model, she's going to be taking all sorts of criticism for, from the modeling side and from the Muslim community, like both of these communities, but then coming out and taking this huge opportunity she has, which she has done before. Like I was reading her interview about like the Yeezy fashion show and her not liking an outfit and her turning it down. And she knew this was a huge opportunity. But then again, like knowing that if this doesn't comply with her faith, she doesn't want it. And then the Western context, like knowing that this is what we've known as beautiful for so long. For so long, we've had these standards, like this is what's beautiful, this is what a model is. And this has been imposed on us, right? So this is all we know. To be a woman is A, B, C, this is what it is. And so when someone comes across with a hijab on their head and says, no, this is what it also means to be beautiful, and then comes across to improve that says, maybe this, I wasn't my best, I'm going to even do better. I think a role model like that is just priceless to have. And that's why I was so taken aback by her story. I thought it was amazing to see, and it's an amazing representation of our faith even.
Yeah, honestly, like going off of like the Western culture thing, I feel like that's also something that I struggled with when I was growing up too, regardless of the hijab. Muslim women, like, I mean, every like Muslim, like, strives to dress modestly. And when I was younger, I would see people that didn't dress as modest, and it just like steered me more away. I was just like, why can't I dress like them? Or why do I have to cover up? Why don't they have to cover up? And honestly, like that was one thing that I struggled with as well. And I feel like being American Muslim like really adds on to your struggle on being modest or wearing a hijab. And I feel like that's why everyone has their own different timelines. And a couple of days ago, we had a conversation with the Imam, and he basically said, like, are you a Muslim looking at Islam through an American lens, or are you Muslim looking at Islam through an Islamic lens? And that really opened up my eyes, because it's so true when we tend to bend the rules of Islam for the sake of like living in America, which is so wrong. But everyone has their own struggles. But regardless of that, we will be closing off soon. We've almost hit the 1 hour mark. So I think, and I'm just gonna close it off from here.
yeah, so I just want to say thank you to everyone who listened in and heard all of our individual stories, whether we were as hijabis or non-hijabis. And again, like Umama said, this is a very broad topic and we don't want to rush it. So please look forward to part 2 where we'll be discussing more about this. And until then, we'll see you guys later. Salam.
Okay, thank you guys.